Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, several doctors are sent to jail in Kenya after months of strikes continue in defiance of a court order. Also, the UN raises the alarm over the growing number of people fleeing conflict in South Sudan. Standing at more than 1.5 million, it's become the continent's worst refugee crisis. And the story behind the story. We head to Algeria to take a look at the cave where the author of Don Quixote hid from slavers, a cubbyhole that allowed Miguel de Cervantes to go on to write the classic wanderer's tale. But first, we turn to Kenya, where judges ordered 7 leaders from the Doctors' Union to be jailed for refusing to call off ongoing strikes at public hospitals. The ruling prompted fears of public unrest as the opposition condemned it as setting an extremely dangerous precedent. Doctors have been on strike since early December, calling for delivery on a 2013 deal for a 150 to 180% pay rise and an overhaul of working conditions. The government says it can only afford a 40% hike. The walkouts have taken a sometimes fatal toll on the country's health service. For more on this, we're joined by Lenny Ruvaga, who's in Nairobi for us. Lenny, bearing in mind all the disruption that's been caused by the months of strikes, is the jailing of striking doctors likely to work in Kenyatta's favour in an election year?
Thank you for that, Georgia. Apparently not. Being the silly season, you find that most labor organizations are fronting their demands. And so this will really eat into his support base. Most of the doctors have support of the common man on the ground, the public, to 70 to 30%. Those in support are for them agitating for a pay rise, because you find that doctors earn around $400 to around $800, whereby a legislator earns around $14,000. So there's a big discrepancy in pay between these two cadres of professionals. And so the president will not get support, and he's seen as abetting corruption and not putting his fist down on this. So yes, it will eat into his support base, and he's seen as being lackluster in the fight against clergies.
So you mentioned there, Lenny, some concern about corruption. Is frustration over the health system confined just to pay and condition of medical staff, or does it go beyond that?
It goes beyond that. There are very many gray areas. You do find that, Georgia, last October, there was a scandal of about $30 million, which the Anti-Corruption Authority and the Senate are still investigating. There was allegations of pilferage of these monies, which were meant to buy medical supplies, kits, and basically to service the health ministry. So you do find that there's wanton runaway corruption, and the strike is just one of the many salient issues that have come to the fore, but indeed it goes deeper than just the strike and them agitating for better pay and better demands. Yes.
Thank you very much. Lenny there for us in Nairobi. 6 Ivorian journalists have been arrested on suspicion of spreading false information in a bid to incite soldiers to revolt. It comes a week after yet another set of troops mutinied over pay. Arnaud Froger brings us more.
The 6 journalists arrested on Sunday all belong to opposition or independent print media outlets. According to the Attorney General, they were all involved in the publishing of false information in relation with the recent mutinies here in Ivory Coast. After a first wave of insurrections over back pay in January, elite troops fired into the air and seized control of 2 cities last week. And just like in the previous mutinies months ago, they were asking for bonuses and wage increases, but this time the government claims it has restored peace and calm without any payment. The credibility of this official version has been questioned into the local papers, but according to the media trade unions, the government really is shooting itself in the foot by arresting journalists.
We met with all the media unions this morning to review the situation of our colleagues. We unanimously condemn these arrests. We think that the 2004 press-related law enables the authorities to deal with this issue without sending journalists to jail.
The Attorney General is accusing this journalist of encouraging copycat mutinies, but he did not go into details about the content of the alleged fake reporting. And as no soldier has yet been prosecuted over these mutinies, many members of the press here feel that their colleagues have been made into scapegoats for the unrest.
Arnaud Froger there for us. Well, 3 English-speaking activists pled not guilty to terrorism charges in military court on Monday before their trial was postponed in Cameroon. The trio was arrested last month and faced the death penalty if found guilty, though those sentences are seldom carried out in the country. All the men are secessionists from an Anglophone movement that accuses the majority Francophone government of discrimination. There have been general strikes in Anglophone regions since October, and the trials exposed deep-seated national divisions. The following speaker is a friend of the defendants, and he has asked to remain anonymous.
I'm telling you that we are prisoners within our own homes. You cannot move freely, you cannot talk with people, you cannot say anything, you cannot just sit with friends and talk. Because when you sit with friends and you are talking, they just come and round you people up and go out to their stations and say that you people are talking about Southern Cameroon, threatening people, beating people mercilessly. And there are cases that they even move to houses, break the doors, carry out children from there, and then just go to their stations and write fabricated stories.
Nigeria's president said that he and his US counterpart discussed a possible new arms deal for the African nation. Muhammadu Buhari spoke with Donald Trump by phone on Monday, their first since the US leader was inaugurated. Abuja's been trying to persuade the US to sell it military aircraft to help in the fight against Boko Haram insurgents. Under Buhari's predecessor, Goodluck Jonathan, Washington had blocked arms sales and ended training of Nigerian troops, partly over concerns about human rights. There are warnings that violence in South Sudan sparked Africa's largest refugee crisis. Most of the displaced are fleeing to Uganda, but there are also thousands who are staying in their homeland after having been forced from their communities.
They fled in a hurry and only took a few belongings with them. These South Sudanese refugees left their country to escape clashes between government and rebel forces. They have just arrived in neighbouring Uganda.
Look at me. I'm wearing torn, dirty clothes. We sleep in the bush. This is a terrible situation.
The UN says the situation in South Sudan has now sparked Africa's biggest refugee crisis. Nearly half of the country's 1.5 million refugees are in Uganda. Currently, 2,000 people, mostly women and children, are arriving in Uganda every day.
I had just planted some crops and I was waiting to harvest. I lost everything because of the war. They're killing people. I was scared for my life.
Many people have fled their homes but stayed in South Sudan. The UN special representative in the country recently visited a camp in Bentiu for these internally displaced people.
We've got operations and fighting both in the south and unfortunately up in the Upper Nile state as well. We need a peace agreement. We need peace. That is the most fundamental element that's missing in South Sudan.
The UN said this was an unprecedented crisis and it needed €1.5 billion to respond to it. The conflict initially pitted President Salva Kiir and the National Army against the rebels of his former Vice President Riek Machar. Later, the fighting increased when different armed groups joined both sides, forcing so many South Sudanese to flee their homes.
One of Spain's greatest ever writers spent an important chapter of his own life hiding from slavers in a cave in Algeria. Spain's recently helped restore the spot that helped prolong the life of Miguel de Cervantes before he went on to write Don Quixote.
It's in this cave, high up in the Algiers district of Belouizdad, that Miguel de Cervantes sought refuge during his second escape attempt in 1577.
As you know, Miguel de Cervantes was held captive in Algiers for 5 years, from 1575 to 1580. Fortunately, he found this cave where he escaped with his companions. They used to go down to the city and come back to the cave in order to get some news from the outside.
The time spent in Algiers left a profound impression on Cervantes and had a lasting impact on his work. The author directly referenced the city in several plays and wrote about captivity in Don Quixote, his most influential novel. A historical and cultural site, the Cervantes Cave has long been neglected by local authorities, but they're now hoping to renovate it and open it up to visitors.
We're working with the Cervantes Institute in Algiers to hold activities there with children from the neighboring district.
Future plans include restoring the cave's floors, as well as hiring security guards and cleaners. A way to breathe new life into this symbol of Algeria and Spain's shared history.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.